I've completed my summaries on the first two stories in Tales from the Pizzaplex Book 4, those being Submechanophobia and Animatronic Apocalypse, and both those stories were pretty good. So now it's time to do a summary on the final story in the book, Bobbiedots Part 1. The thing I really like about Tales from the Pizzaplex is they take the style of FNaF Fright's books, but upgrade the style a bit and also do a bit more unique stuff with the stories. For example, in FNaF Frights, the epilogues and first pages of each story were hard to read because of how thin the letters were, and now with Tales, the white text on the black pages was made more bold and easier to read. That's an upgrade. But concerning more unique stuff, there's Cleathrophobia, which had a prologue, and now with Bobbiedots, we actually have a two-part story. The first of the two is this story, obviously the Bobbiedots Part 1, and the next book has the title story of the Bobbiedots Conclusion. It's really cool, and I like how Tales is being a bit more unique than usual. So I think we should begin reading, because I've heard good things about the story, and I haven't been spoiled on anything except one minor thing. So I'm really excited, and I will say, though, that I am a little bit dead because I wanted to get this video out today, so I stayed up until like 4 AM reading, and for some reason I woke up at 10 AM, so I'm really tired. So if I sound dead in this video, sorry about that, but that's why. So without further ado, let's start talking about the Bobbiedots Part 1.
Make me a hero, someone to turn to and rely on their will to win. Make me a hero who puts up a fight both day and night. Oh.
The main character of the story is Abe, an employee at Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex whose life is not exactly the best. His dad had always been trying to get to good places in life, and his urge to reach that kinda made his mom miserable, and his mom also had dementia. Abe was sitting in his chair in the Pizzaplex security office staring at the 40-story tall Fastplex tower. It almost seemed to have a radiating glow, which Abe thought was probably just his imagination. He'd so badly wanted to live there, it was larger than life to him. Abe had to get through a pile of work orders and also watch a lecture for an online leadership class which he was struggling to pay attention to. His best friend Rodin came into the office asking if he was about done with work and ready to hang out with them for another coworker Nell's birthday. They'd be hanging out at Al Chip's, but Abe was just way too busy right now. The sad thing about Abe is that he doesn't actually have the luxury of having nice things to eat or a nice place to live. When he finished his work for the day, he headed over to the dumpster of the building and found a couple untouched slices of pizza in the trash that he grabbed and ate. He was almost caught by a security guard roaming around, but he was okay. He headed over to a back hallway extending from Roxy Raceway and made his way into an opening in a mound of race car tires that was blocked off by a bike. This was his home. This was where he slept. Abe obviously didn't like living in the Pizzaplex. He didn't like the animatronics, and he liked Roxy less than most of them. One time he had seen Roxy walking around near one of the raceway doors while he was on his way to his hidey hole. Once Abe was sure no one was around, he opened up his laptop and wrote an email to his mom. His mom, like I said, had dementia, so that kind of prevented her from asking questions, and Abe kind of bent the truth to prevent her from worrying about him. Abe had actually gotten this job a year ago by lying on his resume. He had all the skills needed to do the job, but he had gotten them in ways that wouldn't have given him a chance to get the job. All Abe's money had gone into his mom's medical bills, and their house was gone as Abe's dad had moved across the country to chase questionable business deals, and it had gotten foreclosed. So Abe had no money to keep the house, and only money to help his mom, and that landed him living in this place, stuck living in this tire hut, living off trashed pizza, and always having to hide from security guards. Abe was hoping to get a promotion soon. All the high-end workers at the Pizzaplex got to live for free in the luxurious Fastplex tower, and Abe was dying to live there. He fell asleep with that thought in his mind, and we cut to really early in the morning when Abe is in the bathroom near the main lobby of the Pizzaplex, passing by the Fazpad and Glamrock Gifts, both areas we see in the game. Though, if I recall correctly, there isn't a bathroom there in the game, but whatever. After he finished washing himself, brushing his teeth, and shaving, I walk into the bathroom. Yeah, there's a dude named Evan in this story. He's basically the opposite of me in real life. He's short, he's balding, and he has a child. Me, I'm tall, I have hair, and I am a kid, so yeah, not me. Not me at all. Unless I'm using illusion disc. So Evan questions why Abe is here so early, but Abe dodges the question and asks him the same back. Evan lived in the Fazplex tower and he was a Pizzaplex team leader, so Abe didn't think he needed to be here early, but Evan told him that he left early yesterday to go to his son's hockey game, and apparently one of the Bobbiedots had taught his son a new move. Abe didn't know what a Bobbidot was, and Evan explained that Bobbiedots were new state-of-the-art holographic systems at the Fazplex tower. As Abe left the bathroom, he continued to think about the Fazplex tower. He'd live there soon. very soon, but it actually ended up being sooner than expected. 2 hours into his workday, he was called into admin, and the new director of personnel, Margaret Waterman, informed him that he had gotten the promotion he had applied for. His work was very good, and while he hadn't yet completed the last course he needed to be complete for the position, they decided to give him the promotion conditional on him being able to complete the course within the next month, which Abe said he could do. So lucky Abe, he got the promotion and he didn't have to be homeless anymore. Now he could live in the Fastplex Tower, all he dreamed of. Or could he? See, when he made it to the Fastplex Tower, the administrative offices were exactly as amazing as he expected. He was so excited to get into his room. Except there was only one empty room, and it was off limits. Abe told the lady there, named Jen, that if it was a tech problem, he could handle it, but she told him that if it's off limits, she cannot assign it. But Abe wouldn't let this stop him. He lied to Jen and told her there was someone at the front door with roses for her, and they needed her signature. He told her he'd manage the desk while she was gone, and as soon as she was out of sight, he went to the computer and changed the status of the off-limits room to active. He wasn't able to change the name of the occupant, though. Landon Prout was glued onto the occupant name, but he was able to print out an ID badge and took it. Jen came back and said the delivery guy couldn't wait, and once again apologized that they didn't have a room for Abe, and he said it was fine and told her to have a good day. Later that day, after work, Abe headed to his apartment, passing some girls in the hallway who were dressed for a party. Abe wished he could have been a bit more friendly to them, not that he was rude or anything, it's just that he needed to keep a low profile, as he was basically living in his apartment that he wasn't supposed to live in. However, his keycard worked, and he was very happy when he got into the apartment. It wasn't massive, but it was nice that he actually had a home. Suddenly, an AI with pink pigtails and basically pink everything appeared on a see-through computer screen. The AI was named 3, and she said that we haven't had any visitors for a while. Abe questioned what she meant by we, and she said never mind about that. Abe began walking around the apartment. Because this room had been off limits, he wanted to ensure everything was in proper working order. Everything seemed to be fine. Then 3 told Abe that she had been the diet and lifestyle Bobbidot. Her job was to manage the household. She was in charge of cleaning, getting supplies such as Abe's groceries, and she also monitored his health. Abe went into the bathroom, 3 following him, and he pulled out toothpaste and a toothbrush from the cabinet. But then he noticed hot sauce in there. He asked 3 why it was there, and she said it was the best mouthwash. Abe thought maybe this was just a minor glitch in her programming, maybe why this apartment was off limits. He'd expected something more drastic, and as Abe was leaving the bathroom, 3's mouth opened and her body split apart and either half fell to the floor. Abe looked back at her and somehow she was back in her previous form. We cut off there, somehow, I don't know how we just skip over that, but we do. So we cut to Abe back at work, and he was now a team leader, and this new job required him to basically train new employees. Right now he was showing a new employee who seemed to be a little under 20 named Preston around the West Arcade. We get a glimpse of DJ Music Man sleeping in his sound booth, and Abe shows Preston around the tubes in the walls, the ones DJ Music Man goes through. Apparently employees can walk through them too, which makes me wonder why we can't in Security Reach. Wouldn't a chase sequence with DJ Music Man through a maze of tubes be so cool? However, I'm not discrediting the chase sequence we actually got, as it was probably my favorite part of the game. Speaking of that sequence, we get a very similar part to it in this story. Preston has to go to the washroom and Abe does too, but when Preston said he needed to, Abe told him to be careful. Once they finished, Preston asked why Abe told him to be careful, and just then, DJ Music Man's hand was thrown through the bathroom door, and his face could be seen through the doorway. He grabbed Preston for a second, but Abe was able to back him away in time to keep him out of the DJ's grasp. Abe explained that DJ Music Man had an experimental bouncer mode, which had been removed, but with some lines of code still around. This kind of explains the sequence from Security Reach, because we learn about bouncer mode and that's why he attacks us, but it's never really explained why, so it's nice that we get a little bit of an explanation here. We cut to Abe back home, moving some of the stuff he had stored in small places around the Pizzaplex back into his room. 3 Bobbiedots showed up in his room. One was 3, but there was also a blue one named 1 who was in charge of entertainment and media, and a green one named 2 who was in charge of scheduling, news, and information. All the Bobbiedots found Abe to be moderately handsome, supposedly liking his freckles, weird, which Abe didn't really. He felt kind of comfortable talking to the Bobbiedots about whatever though, probably because they were just holograms and weren't real. The Bobbiedots all kind of had beef with each other, not like they disliked each other, they just bickered a lot. They were like siblings. Later in the day, Abe was organizing stuff, and he found that Landon's clothes and stuff were still here, and they were in a closet. They were pretty nice clothes too, and 3 guessed that they would probably fit Abe. He started to try on some of the clothes, taking off his shirt, and found that all the Bobbiedots were watching him, so he asked for some privacy. He put on some clothes, and one said that he looked like he was ready for a night out dancing, and the Bobbiedots put some music on. For whatever reason, Abe had felt really happy, and he just went all out, dancing with the Bobbiedots until he was sweating, realizing he'd have to wash the clothes, but 3 said she'd take care of it. Abe was hungry, so 3 prepared a meal for him based on all the stuff in his blood that he was supposedly lacking. Abe told her that they should just skip the details, and this actually made 3 cry because it made her feel like Abe didn't appreciate her. Abe tried to tell her he did appreciate her, but it didn't really work. So what he decided to do was give all the Bobbiedots names to try and overshadow the underappreciation thing. This worked pretty well. He named 3 Rose, he named 2 Olive, and he named 1 Gemini. Once he named all of them, he made sure to emphasize the fact that he appreciated all of them, and all of them smiled. Abe's dinner was Moroccan-based food, and he found that it actually tasted really good. Abe made a joke that he'd shut off Olive if she tried to pat him on the head, to which she responded saying he can't shut her off. It kinda reminds me of how in FNaF World, if you turn off Chica's Magic Rainbow's voice, she kills you. So yeah, Abe decides to ask the Bobbiedots about Landon, asking where he went, why he left his nice clothes behind and stuff like that, but the Bobbiedots continuously avoided his questions. Abe wondered why, but he just assumed it was because they were programmed to keep information about previous tenants to themselves. After all, he wouldn't want them spewing information to the next tenant who lived there. They all watched a movie together, and Abe said goodnight to them. He wrote his mom the daily email telling her all about his day and talking about the Bobbiedots, and then went to sleep. The next morning, just as Abe was about to leave for work, he overheard a few women speaking in the hallway. Because his tenancy here at the Fastplex Tower was unauthorized, he had to steer clear of all his neighbors and such just in case. So he waited a bit before going out for work. The Bobbiedots questioned why he hadn't left yet, as he would be late for work if he didn't go as soon as possible, but then Abe noticed that there had been a trap door in the ceiling. Gemini told him it was just for maintenance and tenants didn't have access, but Abe noticed that it wasn't completely closed. Then we got to Abe at work. He was working in the Fastplex arena right now, and since his maintenance here was easy, he was able to get away with playing some laser tag. The arena was really loud and bright, and the symbols and stuff on the walls of the maze made Abe wonder whether or not it was an actual code or something. All Abe had to do was find an alien staff bot whose programming was messed up. The bot had been saying resistance is pizza instead of resistance is futile, which is kind of funny. This is also kind of interesting because although there are still overnight security guards in the Pizzaplex at this point, there are also the bots around, not yet staff bots, as they would take over many positions in the future. It gives us a good time frame of when this story takes place, as it must be before the staff bots were brought into the positions of overnight guards, but also can't be too much earlier than that since the attractions we see in Security Breach are all already here, and other stories depict different attractions despite it seemingly being the same Pizzaplex since multiple stories focus on that one specific one. So it would be weird if they were focusing on a Pizzaplex that wasn't the same one from the game, so it's most likely that those attractions just changed over the years. Abe had also been working here for over a year, and the Pizzaplex had been open for 5 years by the time of Security Breach. So this story probably takes place like a year or two before Security Breach. Anyway, back to the story. After Abe fixed up the bot, he decided now he could have a little fun and play some Phaser Blast himself. Unfortunately, the bots moved around differently each game, so even though Abe was good at the game, a bot got the jump on him. Trying to dodge the bot's blasts, Abe accidentally twisted his ankle. A kid even ran up to him to see if he was okay, calling him sir, which made him feel old and stupid. He supposed he would have to do paperwork for the rest of the day. When he got home, the Bobbiedots made a really big deal over Abe's twisted ankle. As they watched a movie together, their continuous questions of how he was feeling was a little annoying, but Abe felt glad that they were so concerned. That night, Abe had woken up to something he couldn't pinpoint. He began hearing a sound like something rubbing on a carpet or something, and he worried it was like snakes or something, and he hated snakes. He asked the Bobbiedots if anything was going on, but the apartment was secure. He hadn't been discovered living here unauthorized like he worried. While he was up, he decided to go to the bathroom, and he felt as if someone was watching him. Even when he looked around and saw no one, not even the Bobbiedots at the moment, he couldn't shake the feeling. When he went out of the washroom, he asked the Bobbiedots if they watched him, but they said that they don't observe him, they just respond to him, and they were all dormant at night unless summoned. Begrudgingly, Abe went back to sleep. The next night, Abe was once again abruptly woken up at around 1 a.m., around the same time as the night before. He had heard the same sound from the night before, and this time he didn't ask for the lights. He stepped out of his bedroom, and more unique sounds came from around him. One sound was like fabric interacting with wind, and another was like a muffling, scraping sound, like something was climbing up the wall, and it sounded really close. He asked for the lights and found that he was right underneath the trapdoor, wondering if whatever it was had gone through it. Abe asked the Bobbiedots what the trapdoor was really for. As it turns out, these Bobbiedots were Gen 2s. These ones were confined to screens throughout the apartment that they could switch between, but the Gen 1s had been actual physical animatronics that had been connected by cables to a network throughout the building, and the trapdoor was for the Gen 1s. The first generation Bobbiedots were actually still up in the crawl space above the ceiling. They had been damaged, but they no longer had the task of assisting the tenants, but they still tried to. Sometimes they would come out of the trapdoor and try to help out as best they can. Abe headed back to bed pretty freaked out. He wondered if he really was actually safer here than he was in his tire fort. The next morning, Abe got a little upset with Rose because he thought that she opened up the garbage disposal while his hand was in it. He wasn't really mad at her, but she felt like he was, and he felt bad. However, then Gemini put some music on he hated, and he exclaimed that he wanted no music. The Bobbiedots felt like he was mad at them, and Olive suggested that he needed to relax in some water. Abe wished he could use the roof's hot tub, but just then, Rose told him that his bathtub has jets, so he goes and takes a bath. Rose is a bit upset because that means lunch will be a while, but she figures she'll survive. Yeah, Rose is like really obsessed with food and stuff, so yeah, I can relate. Abe brings a book into the bath with him and eventually realizes that the water is really hot. He calls for Rose and asks her to turn down the water temperature, and she nods in response. She disappears again, but suddenly the water starts burning. He immediately jumped out and hopped into the shower, turning on the cold water. He yelled for Rose to turn the bath off and drain it, and she did, seeming upset. Rose was pretty sensitive. Abe's skin had been a bit burned, so Olive suggested he put some aloe vera on his skin, so Abe apologizes to Rose for yelling and he asks how the water got to be so hot. The Bobbiedots explained that it was the Gen 1s and that their cables occasionally get tangled with the power and plumbing systems in his apartment, which explained why it was off limits. Abe asked them if there was a solution, and Rose suggested that they set up monitoring protocols to keep an eye on what the Gen 1s are doing, and that Abe can help them by telling them what he'd be doing in advance so that they can ensure everything is in proper working order and functions smoothly. Abe thought that was a good idea. He later writes an email to his mom, basically lying that his day was good and stuff. This apartment didn't really feel safe anymore, though, if he was honest. We cut to Abe at work teaching Preston how to fix a generator in the daycare of the Pizzaplex. Preston proceeds to ask a question everyone wonders, and Abe gives us an answer that really doesn't satisfy anyone. And of course, Preston's question is, why are the generators in the play structures? Abe's answer is, does anything about this make sense? So yeah, I guess that's as good as an explanation as we're gonna get. Just kidding, Abe actually gives us some pretty interesting insight on the daycare and the daycare attendant. Basically, after the daycare was completed, it was found that there was an issue with the lights as they kept shorting out, so to ensure that they stayed on, there were backup generators created, and the only place they could conceal these generators was in the play structures. As for the daycare attendant, he was actually originally a stage animatronic whose whole shtick was to turn evil when the lights turned out. When the animatronic was repurposed to be the daycare attendant, they weren't able to get rid of the dark side, so they just repurposed that as well. And it worked in tandem with the lights turning off, so they just tried to ensure that they stayed on rather than trying to fix sun. So after that story dump, Abe thinks about the fact that he doesn't know if he's safe anymore, but he has nowhere else to live. So he can't move out, and he just has to figure out how to survive his current situation. Also, I should mention, while all this was going down, the lights were actually off, and Moon was around looking into the structures at them. But once they fixed the last generator, he retreated, and Preston was noticeably calmed down. We skip ahead to the end of the week, where nothing really happened. One day, it was raining, and Rose suggested Abe make cookies, and he thinks that's a pretty good idea. First, he decides to make tea, though, and when he placed the filled kettle onto one of the burners, it flared on by itself and set Abe's sleeve on fire. He immediately whipped it off and put out the fire. He put some aloe vera on and he was fine, but the Bobbiedots said that the Gen 1s were able to get into their programming, but they said that they wouldn't stop trying to help Abe. Abe didn't confess that he was kind of losing faith in them. A couple days later, Abe got home a bit late and he asked for the lights. However, no one responded and the lights remained off. He reached for the light switch when electricity surged from the wall and zapped him, throwing him across the room and into the couch. When the Bobbiedots finally came, Olive explained that her Gen 1 counterpart tangled with the light system and hijacked her controls. Olive was able to reroute the light system so her counterpart couldn't get to them. Halfway through eating a tuna sandwich for dinner, Abe called for a household meeting. Abe told the Bobbiedots that he wanted to talk to the Gen 1s and try to reason with them. But the Bobbiedots told him that the Gen 1s are too messed up to understand reason, and Abe wouldn't be able to go up to their crawlspace anyway. Abe wanted to know why the Gen 1s were trying to hurt him, but Gemini said that she feels like they more so are just trying to help him. Olive suggested maybe the Gen 1s were close enough to being human that they envy Abe for actually being human. Rose then suggested maybe they think Abe is Landon and that they were attacking him because Landon didn't have freckles like Abe did. Abe had to admit that although this was a serious situation, the Bobbiedots were funny as hell. Suddenly though, Abe felt sick. He rushed to the washroom and threw up. In the background, the Bobbiedots were bickering or doing some annoying stuff, and Abe asked for them to leave him alone for a few minutes. He went back to bed and began thinking he felt like he was poisoned. He wondered if maybe the Gen 1s poisoned him, or even if the Bobbiedots had done it and were just pretending to be his friends all along. He felt nauseous again and ran back to the bathroom. We cut to a week later, which is interesting because this is the end of the story, and in all 3 stories in this book, the ending happens a week later. Whatever. Anyways, Abe had started eating takeout food so no one can poison it, and he didn't trust the Bobbiedots anymore. He felt like they were really evil and only pretended to be his friend. He wrote an email to his mom basically telling half-truths as he had been doing the entire time, and as he went back to sleep, a cable was dragged along the apartment and flung up into the trapdoor. Abe heard the sound of the trapdoor closing, and the story ends right there. I think this story was probably the best of the book. Not that much really happened, but I actually liked how the characters were, and I felt the story was written pretty well. I'm really excited to see how this thing ends in book 5, but for that we gotta wait more than 3 months. It's gonna be a long wait, holy crap. But while we are waiting, I want to know your thoughts. What did you think about the Bobbiedots Part 1? Did you like this story? Let me know in the comments, and if you did enjoy this video, please do leave a like and subscribe if you want to. We're getting so close to 10,000 subscribers, so if you could help me reach the goal, I would really appreciate it. Most likely tomorrow I will be releasing my summary of the epilogue of this book, so stay tuned for that video. But while you're waiting, check out my summaries on Submechanophobia and Animatronic Apocalypse, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys!